Okay, now I am speaking to people about people in North America being allowed to drive a car from North America to Europe and from Europe into North America. And the way that we need to do this is by putting car containers from Alaska into Russia in the Trans Siberian Highway so that people are allowed to drive from North America into Europe. Now, right now, they have a road that's connecting South Africa to Russia and China. So people who are three times further are allowed to drive in Africa to Russia and China, but people in North America are not allowed to do this. Now, the way that we can do this, right, is that the distance from the Dalton Highway in Alaska to the Bering Strait is 800 kilometers, okay? And the distance from the Bering Strait to the Trans Siberian Highway is 1,600 kilometers. Now, the total distance of these two locations, right, is 2,400 kilometers, okay? Now, if we get a 12-meter car container, which is $1,500, right? And we hold on a second. We get a 12-meter car container, $1,500, okay? And we would need 200,000 of these car containers in order to put a road from Dalton to the Bering Strait, okay? And to do this, we would need a 66,000 or 67,000 car containers, okay? That is the distance from Dalton to the Bering Strait. And for us to put car containers from the Bering Strait to the Trans Siberian Highway, right? We would need another 133,000 car containers. So the total distance between these two locations, right, would be 200,000 car containers. This is how many car containers we would need to be able to drive from Alaska to Russia and be able to drive to Europe using car containers and the highways that they have. And the reason why a car container is better is because there's such terrible weather that if you built a road on this, the weather would be destroying this road every 10 seconds. And that is why if you built paved inside a car container, which there should be car containers with a road pre-built in them so we could drive on the car container, then we would be able to drive to these locations like we were supposed to. They have artificial roads, but they do not have a paved road inside of a car container, which doesn't make sense. But either way, okay, so now we're looking at it like this, okay? So we need 200,000 car containers to drive between these two destinations, okay? And the price of a car container is $1,500. So we times this thing, $1,500. The total price, $300 million, okay, to build a car container road from Dalton to the Bering Strait. And then the Bering Strait to the Trans-Siberian Highway would be $300 million. Now, if we do this, they do offer payments for this stuff, right? At 1/10 the value. So if we were to do this in 1 year, okay, we would pay $30 million, right, in 1 year, or $30 million a month to have these car containers put inside of this location, okay? But since this is evangelist work, right, you know, we're doing this to better society so that you and I have the same privileges as somebody in Zimbabwe who has no currency at all, who right now can drive to China and Russia, and we are not being allowed to do this, okay? And we should be complaining that we say, hey, we should be allowed to do this, but okay, we do this. We do this in monthly payments, right? We do this $30 million. Okay, that's, million people, $30 a month. And then at the end of 1 year, we can have this whole thing for ourselves, Or, we can, because we're doing evangelist work, do this in a 10-year payment, right? Which would mean that if we paid these people back in 10 years, right, we would pay, I'm sorry, my math is terrible, but if we were paying these people back in 10 years, right, then we could pay $30 million a month, okay? And then in 10 years, we would be able to pay these people back, and we'd have a road to drive between Alaska to Russia so that we could go into Europe and the people of Europe could drive back to us, right? And then, we're saying $300 million. We go to the World Bank because, we say, hey, we deserve the right to drive on a road into Europe like the Europeans deserve to drive to us, like South Africa can drive into Russia, and we deserve the same right. We go to the World Bank. They give us a loan, okay, because $300 million, that's not a lot of money, right? We go to the World Bank. We ask them for a loan, and they give us a 20-year loan on this stuff, right? And then we're paying $1.75 million a month, right? Because the World Bank says, okay, we'll loan it to you for 20 years, right? And let you use this as a road because, for one thing, we do need a car container that has a paved road inside the car container because we need to be able to drive in locations where the roof is not going to collapse because of the snow. And we're doing a favor for society. We're letting Europeans drive into our country. We're driving into theirs. We're doing business with each other, putting housing where there wasn't any, And so we could ask the World Bank for a 20-year loan, which we could get at, $1.5 million a month, okay? That's a million people putting $1.50 a month inside of this for 20 years, But, let's say, we say, okay, well, look, why don't you give us a 40-year loan because we're going to use this thing for the rest of our life. The car container is not going to fall apart. It's always going to be in place. The World Bank says, fine, we give you a 40-year loan, and then we're paying $750,000 a month. Now, if we can get a million people, right, to give 75 cents a month, right, for 40 years, because this thing is going to be there forever, because we need a road, and if so many people do use this thing, that we can pay for these car containers and build a real road with a tunnel, because that's going to cost a lot of money. If you build a real road with a tunnel so that it can survive the snow, that's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars, okay? And are you prepared to wait for hundreds of billions of dollars, or are you going to let people drive between these two countries so that we are allowed to speak to one another and to offer each other development, which we are supposed to be doing, and to expect to get $100 billion is not a very realistic figure when no one has done this yet. But what I'm saying, if $300 million is a realistic figure, and we could lift these car containers by helicopter, and there's even a helicopter that I want to give to you, which I'm not going to say because I'm putting more static on the table. I don't want static, right? And what I'm saying is that if we built 100 million car containers in Dalton to the Bering Strait, and then we put a boat, then we could ship products on this boat in 1 hour or however long it takes for it to travel 90 kilometers, okay? And then we could have an everyday shipping service, and we can make billions of dollars shipping products, and which we otherwise wouldn't be able to do any other way, because we can't, to put products on a shipping boat, we have to fill the shipping boat, or we are paying an excessive amount of money for these products. And if we drive it in a vehicle, then we could bring a less amount for the price that they're supposed to be, and it would allow us to have more tourists that are coming to our region using this bridge, right? If we manage to get, 1 million people a month, which I'm hoping that we could definitely do, then we've made 10 times the amount. Okay, I'm presuming that every person who crosses this is going to have $100. So we're going to make at least $100 million a month. And if we're leasing these vehicles for $750,000 a month for 40 years, then we're making, 100 times this amount, right? So, well, maybe not 100, whatever the figure is, but pretty close. But what I'm saying to you is that when we do not offer a way to drive from North America into Europe, we are excluding ourselves from the market. We are saying that we are not worth this $300 million, which we could pay in $750,000 a month for 40 years, which is only 75 cents a person. But, it is going to cost more than that to lay down the structure. But even 75 cents a month, I would think that, 75 cents a day would be within your budget. Because what are you talking about? You want to be allowed to drive into other continents? Or do you want to have people tell you that you are not allowed to bring products and tell you who is allowed to put something on a boat and how much you have to put on this boat in order for this person to allow you to pay the price that you're supposed to? And you want only South Africa to be allowed to drive into Russia and China? Or do you want to have this privilege yourself also? And what I'm saying to you, right, is that we should all protest for the rest of our life to put a bridge connecting Alaska to Russia, may it be through a boat or through any means, and that we are allowed to go to these two locations. And myself personally, I feel that we should make a floating bridge that we put between the Bering Strait so people can drive across this floating bridge. But, the floating bridge, that there's a few obstacles that come into play when it comes to that discussion of the cost. From my understanding, a floating bridge, okay, is going to cost $100 million. Okay, this is what my opinion of a floating bridge is going to cost. But relevant to that, we don't need a floating bridge. We could easily use a boat. Okay, this is a very realistic thing. But I believe a floating bridge, there's some benefits to it. But, we could get inside of that discussion. But really, to be honest, I'm not really too worried about the floating bridge as much as there is a way that we can go from Alaska into Europe and we can drive there in a vehicle so that we can go just like South Africa has the right to drive from South Africa into Russia and into China. And we should be allowed the same privilege. And if a couple of car containers, 300,000 with a helicopter lifting them there and putting them in place is going to solve this problem for us, then we should be man enough to put our foot down and say that we are going to make this happen so that we have the same opportunity as people in Africa. Even though we are freezing to death and we don't have the same sunlight, we deserve the same privilege, and we should definitely complain about it. And you should not accept that we do not have a way to drive from Canada into Alaska into Europe. Okay, you should definitely complain about this. You are saying that you do not care about the economy and who comes to your country, and when you do these things, then your kids try harder and you have more things that you do in this world. And having a border guard at Alaska that's letting people in is a good job and it's paying money, and the border guard in Russia that's charging money for people to drive in there, that's a good job, and people should be proud of this job. And I hope that you do it, because I definitely know that if we have the ability, we are meant to do it. And that is what the truth is. And we should definitely do it.